The early morning mist clung to the pine needles like a shroud, dripping from branches with the weight of last night's rainfall. Every step Evan took crunched softly against the wet forest floor, the sound muffled by layers of moss and fallen needles. Rex, the German shepherd, moved with silent precision beside him, muscles coiled and alert, nose twitching as he sniffed the damp air. They had been called to the edge of Pinecrest Forest hours ago, a report of a missing child still resonating in every worried voice on the radio. Evan's heart pounded not from exertion, but from the knowledge that time was not their ally. The woods were dense, almost unnavigable in places where the underbrush clawed at boots and uniform pants alike. He had trained for scenarios like this, every sense sharpened, but nothing could truly prepare a man for the fear of a child lost in the wilderness. "Rex," Evan whispered, his breath forming small clouds in the chilly air, "keep close." The dog's amber eyes met his, glowing with alertness in the diffused morning light. No leash was necessary, the bond they shared rendered it obsolete. A subtle tilt of Rex's head or the soft flex of his ears conveyed warnings, questions, or directives as clearly as any spoken command. The sound of a twig snapping underfoot made Evan freeze, ears straining. Rex stiffened beside him, tail low but rigid, body coiled like a spring. The forest around them was still, but there it was again, a soft, wavering voice that sent a chill through Evan's spine. "Mom told me to wait." The whisper was faint, almost ethereal, carried on the damp air as if the forest itself had decided to speak. Evan's pulse quickened. That was no echo, no hallucination, it was real. A child. Alone. Possibly injured. He crouched lower, eyes scanning the undergrowth, fingers tightening around the grip of his utility knife. "Rex," he murmured, "find him." The dog's ears twitched, nostrils flaring, and without hesitation, Rex darted forward silently, weaving between trees and underbrush with the agility of a shadow. Evan followed, careful not to make any unnecessary noise, trusting his canine partner's instincts completely. Hours seemed to stretch into moments as they navigated the labyrinth of pines. The whisper repeated sporadically, guiding them deeper. "Mom told me to wait." Each time, Evan had to pause, listen, and recalibrate, making sure that every movement was deliberate, every decision precise. There was no room for error. One misstep, one misread sound, and the child could wander further, or worse, encounter danger they couldn't anticipate. The forest seemed to shift around them, shadows deepening, fog curling like ghostly fingers. Fallen logs blocked paths, streams cut across potential routes, and the wind carried every sound in strange, misleading directions. But Rex was unfaltering. The dog's nose led them, paws silent, every movement precise. Evan followed the rhythm of the canine, reading cues, feeling the forest's pulse through his boots and fingertips brushing against tree bark. A sudden rustle from above made Evan glance upward just in time to see a small branch sway violently. "Careful," he whispered. Rex stopped, body rigid, ears flicking forward. The voice came again, closer this time, tinged with panic. "Mom told me to wait, please don't leave me." Evan felt his chest tighten. The child was near, scared, but not yet in immediate danger. Every instinct in Evan screamed to rush forward, but he had learned the hard way that panic leads to mistakes. He crouched low, motioning Rex to advance in careful stages. The forest floor became a maze of obstacles. Roots twisted like serpents, mud sucked at boots, and the scent of pine mingled with the earthy smell of rain-soaked soil. Evan noted each landmark silently, a fallen birch, a moss-covered rock, a leaning pine. Step by step, guided by Rex's unwavering focus, they closed the distance to the child. And then, through the tangle of trees, he saw a small figure sitting on a moss-covered log, knees drawn to the chest, shaking softly, eyes wide with fear. The child's blonde hair clung damply to a pale face, lips quivering as another whisper escaped. "Mom told me to wait." Evan stopped several feet away, not wanting to startle the child. "It's okay," he called softly, voice calm, reassuring. I'm here. You're safe. The child's eyes flicked toward him, terror mingled with hope. Rex sat obediently beside Evan, ears alert, tail still, a silent guardian of this fragile moment. Come here slowly, Evan coaxed. We won't hurt you. My friend here, he gestured to Rex, will keep you safe too. The child hesitated, fear warring with the desperate need for rescue. One small step, then another, and finally, the child crouched beside Evan, wrapping tiny arms around the dog's neck. Rex responded with a gentle nuzzle, warm and grounding, as if to whisper reassurance without words. Evan exhaled slowly, a wave of relief washing through him. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, he said softly. Mom told you to wait, and you waited. That's brave. The forest around them seemed to breathe in tandem, the tension ebbing slightly as the first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating damp needles and the small trio huddled together. But Evan knew this was only the beginning. They were deep in the forest, and returning to safety would be a challenge. There were paths to navigate, obstacles to overcome, and the forest itself to respect. Yet for now, in this brief, silent moment, the child was safe, guided by trust, instinct, and the unbreakable bond between soldier and canine. Every instinct in Evan told him to move carefully, step by step, making no sudden noises. Each second mattered, and the forest had its own rules, unspoken and unforgiving. He touched the child's shoulder gently, letting them know that moving together was the only way out. Rex's eyes met his, amber orbs shining with focus and loyalty, and Evan knew that they could face whatever this forest threw at them next. The whisper came one last time, faint but steady. Mom told me to wait. And this time, it was no longer a cry for help, it was a signal of trust. The child clung to Rex, tiny hands gripping the dog's thick fur as if the German shepherd was the only anchor in a sea of looming pine trees. Evan adjusted his stance, scanning the forest for any signs of danger. The morning mist had lifted slightly, but shadows still lingered, painting dark streaks across the uneven ground. Every snapped twig or rustle of leaves could mask a hidden pitfall or sharp branch, waiting to tear into an unsuspecting foot or limb. All right, we're going to move slowly, Evan whispered, his voice barely above the forest's ambient murmur. The child nodded, wide-eyed, lips pressed together in concentration, as if every movement had to be calculated perfectly. Rex responded instantly, nudging the child gently with his nose, a silent prompt to stand and follow. Evan led the way, one careful step at a time, eyes darting to each movement in the periphery. The forest's scent was sharp now, mingling damp pine with the faint musk of animal life. Birds stirred high in the canopy, their calls a brutal counterpoint to the soft, steady sounds of their progress. Evan's hand rested lightly on Rex's flank, fingers brushing the coarse fur as if drawing reassurance from the dog's silent confidence. He had trained with Rex for years, but no exercise or mission simulation could truly prepare him for the gravity of a child's safety in a living, breathing wilderness. Hours, or perhaps mere minutes, time seemed warped here, passed as they navigated through fallen logs and underbrush. The child's voice was soft but persistent, repeating the phrase like a mantra, "Mom told me to wait." Mom told me to wait. It was both comforting and haunting, a reminder of the stakes at play. Evan noticed the child's shoes were wet and muddy, and the knees of their pants were soaked. A shallow stream snaked across their path, slippery and filled with hidden rocks. He signaled Rex to halt, and crouched to guide the child across, hands steadying them against slick stones. One misstep here could send the child tumbling, and Evan's heart lurched with the potential consequence. But Rex positioned himself in front, body low and firm, ready to intercept any fall. As they progressed, the forest's character seemed to shift. The pines grew taller and denser, branches intertwining overhead to form near-solid canopies that filtered sunlight into fractured beams. Shadows danced and twisted, creating shapes that threatened to spook both the child and Rex. Yet the dog moved with unshakable focus, ears twitching, nostrils flaring, guiding Evan and the child through the safest path. At one point, a sudden gust of wind sent a loose branch crashing down nearby. The child flinched violently, eyes wide with fear, clinging to Rex's side. Evan's heart raced, but he remained calm, crouching to the child's level. "It's all right," he said softly, brushing damp hair from their face. "Rex and I are right here. You're safe. Nothing is going to hurt you." The child nodded, trembling slightly, and whispered the mantra again. "Mom told me to wait." Evan realized that the repetition was a coping mechanism, a tether to the familiar amidst an environment that had no mercy for the unprepared. The sound, soft and frail, urged him to move faster, but carefully. Navigating further, they reached a slope where the forest floor dipped sharply into a shallow ravine. The child's steps faltered, knees shaking, but Rex stayed close, a steadying force. Evan lowered his own body, guiding the child hand over hand, foot over foot, across the treacherous incline. One wrong move, and the child could slip into mud and jagged roots. Finally, they reached a plateau, a small clearing bathed in the fragmented morning sun. The child exhaled deeply, as if they had been holding onto their breath the entire journey. Evan allowed himself a brief moment of relief but knew they were not yet out of danger. The forest still surrounded them, unpredictable and merciless, hiding pitfalls, venomous snakes, or unstable trees. Rex paused, ears pricked, eyes scanning the distance. A rustle from deeper in the woods, perhaps a deer, perhaps something else, made the dog growl lowly, warning Evan to remain vigilant. The child whispered again, voice shaky but clearer now, "Mom told me to wait." This time, it carried a note of trust, an acknowledgement that the boy had chosen to follow Evan and Rex through uncertainty, relying completely on the bond between man and canine. Evan adjusted the child's jacket, noticing the shivering from cold and damp. He knew they needed to find a safe spot soon to warm up, regain energy, and avoid hypothermia. The forest could be unforgiving, hours of exposure could sap strength rapidly. He scanned the horizon, looking for higher ground or a potential ridge that could lead them back toward safety. The clearing, though small, offered a vantage point. From here, Evan could see a faint trail leading deeper but potentially toward the forest's edge. Rex sniffed the ground, confirming the direction. The child, still clinging to the dog, felt safer here, the open space allowing visibility and reducing the fear of hidden dangers. "All right, we're going to follow this path," Evan instructed quietly, step by step, slowly, but steadily. "Trust me, Rex, we've got this." The dog responded with a soft bark, almost an affirmation, before leading the way again. The child followed, whispering the mantra one last time, "Mom told me to wait." The forest's shadows lengthened as the day progressed, but with each careful step, Evan felt the trust of the child grow stronger. The canine's presence, steady and unwavering, formed a shield around them, a living barrier between innocence and the wild. Every step required attention, every breath measured, but the trio pressed onward, bound by courage, instinct, and the fragile thread of hope. The trail ahead narrowed abruptly, the forest walls closing in, as if the trees themselves were conspiring to test their resolve. Fallen branches crisscrossed the path, and underfoot, slick moss and hidden roots threatened every step. Evan's boots pressed cautiously into the damp earth, each crunch of leaves underfoot sounding louder than it should, echoing through the silent pines. The child clung tighter to Rex, whispering the mantra again, "Mom told me to wait." Mom told me to wait. The repetition, once comforting, now carried a faint tremor of fear, a reminder that the world outside safety could be cruel and unpredictable. Rex's ears twitched at every sound, every faint shift of foliage. The German shepherd moved like a shadow, agile and silent, a perfect blend of muscle and instinct. Evan couldn't help but marvel at the bond they shared. Years of training had forged a seamless understanding, one where glance and gesture communicated more than words ever could. Every time the child faltered, Rex would press against them, a living barrier between vulnerability and danger. A sudden sound, a sharp snap of a twig, made the child jerk violently. Evan froze, eyes scanning every shadow. The forest was alive with the unseen, squirrels leaping between branches, birds flitting overhead, perhaps even a deer startled by their presence. Yet instinct screamed that this wasn't ordinary wildlife. The hairs on the back of Evan's neck bristled as he tightened his grip on the child's hand. "Stay close," he whispered, voice steady though his pulse had quickened. "Rex will keep us safe." The canine barked softly, a controlled sound, and moved slightly ahead, nose to the ground. Evan followed, taking careful steps, scanning every inch of the path. The child stumbled over a root, and Rex intercepted immediately, body pressed against the child's back to prevent a fall. Evan steadied them both, murmuring encouragement, but inside, a knot of tension coiled tighter. The forest demanded vigilance, and he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down. They came to a small ridge overlooking a shallow creek, its waters dark and swirling. The child peered over the edge, eyes wide, hesitant to step closer. The sound of rushing water, though not large enough to pose immediate danger, added a psychological weight, reminding them that nature could shift without warning. A sudden gust of wind sent a cascade of pine needles swirling across the trail, momentarily obscuring their vision. Evan shielded the child, scanning for hazards. "Almost there," he muttered, more to himself than to the child. "One step at a time." Rex pressed forward, signaling the safest path with subtle body movements, a paw pointed, a low growl at potential danger, a nudge in the correct direction. The child's small hands mirrored Rex's movements, unconsciously following the dog's lead. Each step was a dance, a coordination of trust between human and canine. As they descended toward the creek, Evan noticed signs of previous flooding, bent saplings, debris lodged against rocks, mud streaks on tree trunks. The terrain was treacherous, a misstep could slide them into the cold water. He guided the child carefully, crouching to provide support and allowing Rex to buffer any misbalance. Halfway down, the child paused, eyes drawn to a glimmer in the undergrowth. A small, makeshift toy, a carved wooden figure, was partially buried in moss. I left it here," the child whispered. A flicker of vulnerability passed across their face, a reminder that this wasn't just a journey through the forest, but through fear, memory, and the unknown. Evan nodded silently, understanding the depth of attachment a child could have to small comforts amidst chaos. He crouched to pick up the toy, brushing off debris, and handed it back. The child's fingers closed around it tightly, and a small, almost imperceptible smile appeared. It was a fleeting moment of normalcy in an otherwise tense environment. They continued, the creek widening slightly, the water now lapping against slippery stones. Rex paused, nose quivering, ears forward. Something was approaching from upstream, a faint splash, almost rhythmic, but irregular enough to signal caution. Evan stiffened, eyes narrowing. The forest was merciless in its surprises. "Stay close," he repeated, tightening his hold on the child's hand. Rex growled softly, low and warning, muscles coiled like a spring ready to leap. The child leaned instinctively against the dog, trusting its presence more than any adult voice could convey. A shadow moved across the water, fleeting but distinct. Evan's instincts screamed that this was no ordinary animal. Heart pounding, he stepped forward, placing himself between the child and potential danger. The forest seemed to contract around them, every sound amplified, every shadow elongated, as if the trees themselves watched. Then came a louder splash, upstream, followed by a wet, muffled noise that made the child cry out. "Mom!" The whisper was tiny, frightened, and Evan realized how utterly alone they were in this vast, indifferent wilderness. The mantra had shifted from comfort to plea, from repetition to fear. "Mom told me to wait. Mom told me to wait." Rex's body tensed, eyes locking onto the direction of the sound. He barked sharply, commanding attention, then darted forward. Evan followed, carrying the child in one arm while navigating slippery stones. Every step demanded calculation, precision, and nerve. One false move, and they could slide into the frigid creek. Finally, they reached a partially collapsed log bridge spanning the creek. Water surged beneath, turbulent enough to make crossing dangerous. The child froze, panic-stricken. Evan set them down, crouched low, and let Rex guide the way. The dog's steady steps over the unstable bridge were a lesson in trust. The child followed hesitantly, Evan close behind, muscles coiled, every sense alert. Halfway across, a sudden branch snapped beneath the child's foot. Time seemed to stretch. Evan reacted instantly, catching the child with one arm while Rex pressed against them, creating a buffer between fear and reality. The child's heart raced, tears mixing with the misty spray from the creek. "Safe," Evan whispered, voice calm but resolute. "You're safe. Just keep moving." By the time they reached the far bank, hearts pounding and clothes soaked, the child collapsed onto the ground, trembling but alive. Rex curled protectively around them, ears pricked, eyes scanning the surroundings. Evan knelt beside them, brushing hair from the child's face, whispering words of reassurance. The forest still loomed, dark and imposing, but a small clearing ahead promised a moment of respite. For the first time, the child spoke without repetition, just a soft, shivering acknowledgement, "Mom told me." I waited. Evan smiled faintly, knowing that the mantra, though still present, was beginning to transform from fear to trust. The clearing ahead was deceptively calm. Sunlight filtered through the tall pines, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, but the serenity was a fragile illusion. The creek behind them still roared with quiet menace, its waters lapping against the partially submerged logs and rocks. Evan set the child down gently, keeping a hand on their shoulder while Rex circled, alert and watchful. Every muscle in the dog's body was tense, ready to react at a moment's notice. The child hugged the carved wooden toy tightly, pressing it against their chest as though it could ward off the unseen dangers lurking in the forest. "Mom." The whisper trembled, a faint thread of hope wrapped in fear. Evan knelt down to meet their gaze, speaking softly but firmly. "We're going to find her," he promised. "Step by step, we'll get through this. Rex and I aren't leaving you." A sudden rustle in the underbrush made both of them freeze. Evan's eyes scanned the trees, searching for movement, for anything that could signal immediate danger. The child flinched, pressing against his chest. Rex growled low, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through the clearing. The German shepherd's instincts were finely tuned. He was more than a protector, he was a warning system, a living early alert to threats both natural and human. Evan pointed toward a narrow path leading deeper into the woods, where the trees arched overhead, forming a green tunnel. It seemed like the only way forward. "We have to go this way," he said, voice calm but resolute. "Follow me, and don't let go of Rex." The child nodded, gripping the dog's fur as if it were a lifeline. Each step along the trail was precarious. Wet leaves clung to their shoes, slick moss hid treacherous roots, and the uneven terrain demanded absolute attention. The sound of the creek, though now behind them, still echoed in their ears, a constant reminder that nature's power was unpredictable and relentless. As they walked, Evan noticed the signs of past flooding, bent saplings, water-streaked bark, and debris tangled in the undergrowth. The forest had been reshaped by recent storms, and each step carried the risk of another hazard. A large branch snapped underfoot, sending the child stumbling, but Rex immediately pressed against them, steadying their balance. Evan's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of adrenaline and protective instinct. Suddenly, a louder sound reached their ears, a gurgling, rushing noise coming from deeper within the forest. It wasn't just a creek anymore, it was something larger, a surge of water that threatened to overwhelm everything in its path. The child's eyes widened in terror. "Mom told me to wait," but the words trailed off, swallowed by the forest's intensity. Evan stopped, listening carefully. The sound was growing louder, closer. He scanned the trees and saw the glint of sunlight reflecting off a patch of water, an area that should have been dry. Panic threatened to rise, but he pushed it down, focusing instead on strategy. "We need to move faster," he whispered. "Keep close to Rex. No sudden moves." They navigated a narrow ridge, the child clinging tightly to the dog while Evan supported them from behind. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. The forest seemed to close in, the trees forming barriers that forced them along a single precarious path. The sound of rushing water grew louder, sending a chill down Evan's spine. He knew that if they misstepped, the flood could sweep them away in an instant. Suddenly, the child cried out, pointing to a hollow between two trees. "Mom, she's here." Their voice was small but urgent, echoing off the trunks. Evan followed the gaze and saw a figure, partially obscured by shadows, sitting on a fallen log, drenched but unharmed. The child ran forward, with Rex bounding ahead, protective and vigilant. Evan quickened his pace, careful not to trip over roots or loose stones. As they approached, he saw the relief on the mother's face, her arms open and waiting. The child ran into her embrace, clinging tightly, tears mixing with raindrops and sweat. "I waited," they cried. "I waited like you said." The mother hugged the child, gratitude and fear mingling in her eyes. She looked up at Evan, her voice trembling. Thank you for keeping them safe." Rex sat beside them, ears perked, eyes scanning the forest for any lingering threats. He had fulfilled his role flawlessly, a silent guardian who had guided them through danger, fear, and uncertainty. Evan exhaled, the tension slowly ebbing away, though his senses remained alert. The forest was still a living, breathing entity, capable of sudden surprises. For a moment, all was calm. The child pressed the wooden toy against their chest, exhausted but safe. The mother held them close, whispering words of comfort. Evan allowed himself a brief smile, acknowledging the bond that had formed between human and dog, child and protector, man and nature. Yet even in this moment of relief, the forest whispered its secrets, the rustle of leaves, the distant gurgle of water, the creak of old trees swaying in the wind. Danger had not vanished, it had merely shifted. And as they prepared to navigate the final stretch of the forest, Evan knew that vigilance would remain their constant companion. This journey had tested courage, trust, and resilience. But it had also revealed the depth of connection between human and canine, the power of patience, and the quiet strength found in waiting, and in listening, to the whispers of those we love. The forest around them had shifted again. What moments ago had seemed like a safe clearing now felt perilous. Rain had begun to fall steadily, soft at first, then heavy enough to saturate the soil. The ground underfoot turned slippery, slick with mud and wet leaves, each step requiring careful balance. Evan kept his hands on the child's shoulders, guiding them, while Rex ran slightly ahead, scanning every shadow, sniffing the air for signs of danger. The mother held the child's hand tightly, her face pale but determined. "We need to move," she said, her voice barely audible over the sound of rain and the distant roar of the creek, now swelling ominously. "The path isn't safe here anymore." Evan nodded, taking in the situation. The forest had transformed from a labyrinth of dappled light and peaceful pines into a maze of slick roots, shifting mud, and rising water. Each tree trunk was a potential anchor, each branch a tool for balance. He had to make sure the child remained calm, that panic didn't set in. Fear could be as dangerous as the flood itself. They began moving toward a narrow ridge that led up the forest slope, hoping it would provide higher ground. The incline was treacherous, loose soil slipping beneath their boots. Every step had to be deliberate. Evan's heart pounded in his chest, not just from exertion but from the heavy weight of responsibility. This was no ordinary rescue, this was a trial of endurance, strategy, and instinct. Rex's ears pricked at every sound, every crack of a twig, every rush of water. The dog paused, growled, and nudged the child behind a tree as a sudden wave of water from the creek surged closer. Evan helped steady the child, his hands firm but gentle. "Stay behind Rex. Trust him. We're not leaving you. The path narrowed further, flanked by dense trees whose roots twisted like giant serpents. Rainwater cascaded down the slopes, forming small but fast-moving streams that threatened to sweep away loose debris. The sound of the forest was overwhelming, a symphony of falling water, groaning trees, and the distant thunder of the river beyond. The child stumbled, slipping on a slick root, and let out a startled cry. Evan was immediately at their side, gripping their shoulders, while Rex positioned himself between them and the rushing water, a silent sentinel. The dog's presence was reassuring, almost magical, giving the child the courage to breathe and continue. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the trees. A large branch had broken from one of the taller pines, tumbling dangerously toward them. Evan shoved the child to the side just in time, the branch crashing against the forest floor with a thunderous impact. Splinters flew, mud sprayed, and the mother screamed, clinging tightly to the child. Rex barked, a high-pitched, urgent sound that cut through the storm, warning of further hazards. They continued upward, moving as a single unit, coordinated and careful. Every puddle, every muddy patch, every shifting stone required attention. Evan felt the child's small hand gripping his arm, the mother holding onto the child, and Rex moving ahead, ready to intercept any new threat. It was a delicate choreography, a dance with danger where one misstep could be catastrophic. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a temporary plateau, a small area of slightly elevated ground. The rain continued, the wind picking up, but for the moment, they had a brief respite. The child sank to the ground, exhausted, clinging to Rex's fur, while the mother wrapped her arms around them, whispering comforting words. Evan took a moment to assess the surroundings. The forest still raged with energy, water rushing through hidden channels, roots slick, branches threatening, but the plateau offered a strategic vantage point. From here, they could plan their next move, scout for the safest path to reach the upper ridge, and avoid being swept away by the floodwaters. "This is our chance," Evan said, voice calm but intense. "We have to rest, but only briefly. Then we keep moving. The high ground is just ahead, and once we reach it, we'll be safe from the flood." The child looked up at him, eyes wide but trusting. "Rex, will he keep us safe?" Rex gave a low, affirming growl, the kind that reverberated through the forest like a promise. It was not just a sound, it was a vow, a bond, a declaration that no matter what came next, they would not face it alone. The mother took a deep breath, rain dripping down her face, and nodded. "We follow you. Let us, Evan." With that, they prepared to move again. The forest loomed, dangerous and unpredictable, but together, with courage, trust, and vigilance, they advanced, step by step, toward survival and reunion with the world beyond the trees. The tension was palpable, but the team's unity, anchored by the unwavering presence of Rex, gave them hope. And in that moment, despite the chaos, Evan realized something crucial. Courage wasn't just about facing danger, it was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, and inspiring trust even when the storm threatened to consume everything. The plateau offered a brief respite, but Evan knew better than to linger. The rain had not stopped, it had only intensified, each drop striking like a hammer against leaves and rocks. The forest was alive with movement, the branches swayed violently under the weight of the storm, water surged through hidden gullies, and every step forward was a gamble. He looked down at the child, who was trembling from cold and fear, and then at the mother, whose hands were still tightly gripping the child's shoulders. Both had survived this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. "Stay close to me," Evan instructed, lowering his voice so that the words carried reassurance rather than panic. "And Rex, lead the way. No sudden movements, okay?" The German shepherd gave a soft whine, then bolted a few steps ahead, ears perked and tail low, scanning for obstacles and hazards. The path ahead narrowed again, winding through towering pines whose roots twisted into grotesque patterns over the forest floor. Rainwater pooled in pockets, creating mini-lakes that could conceal sharp rocks or slippery patches. Each step had to be deliberate. One wrong move could send them tumbling into the swollen creek below. The child clung to Rex like a lifeline, small fingers gripping the fur tightly, eyes wide and searching for assurance. Evan kept pace, crouched slightly to maintain balance, hand ready to catch the child if they slipped. The mother followed closely, her face etched with tension, sweat and rain mingling into streaks down her cheeks. Every sound in the forest seemed amplified, the gurgling of water in the creek, the creaking of saturated branches, the distant crack of a tree bending under pressure. The storm was relentless, a living adversary that forced them to move with precision and caution. Suddenly, a section of the trail gave way under Evan's foot. Loose soil and wet leaves slid down the slope, sending a small cascade of mud and water toward the child. Evan lunged, catching their arm just in time. Rex barked sharply, positioning himself between them and the unstable ground, teeth bared not in aggression, but as a warning. "Good boy, Rex," Evan whispered, relief and pride mingling in his voice. He helped the child regain footing, then gestured for the mother to advance carefully. Every movement now required a silent agreement: trust the dog, trust Evan, and move as one. As they ascended, the roar of the floodwaters became more ominous. The creek, once a distant companion, now threatened to overtake the lower sections of the forest. Trees leaned at unnatural angles, some stripped of bark and smaller branches, a testament to nature's fury. The smell of wet earth, pine resin, and rushing water filled the air, a sensory reminder of the peril surrounding them. The child's small voice trembled. "I don't want to fall." They looked up at Evan, eyes brimming with fear and the faintest spark of trust. "You won't," he replied firmly. "Rex is here. I'm here. We're not leaving you." He smiled gently, trying to instill confidence. The child's grip on the dog loosened slightly, a tiny but significant sign of trust returning. They reached a fallen log that spanned a small ravine, partially submerged by floodwater. Crossing it would be risky, but it was the only path to higher ground. Evan knelt, testing its stability. Water gurgled below, carrying debris and small branches. Rex sniffed the log, then sat back, waiting for instruction. "Follow me," Evan said. "Step carefully, one at a time. Hold on to Rex if you need to." The child hesitated, fear evident, but the dog nudged them gently with his nose, a silent encouragement. Taking a deep breath, the child placed one foot on the log, then the next, moving slowly while Evan supported them from behind. The mother followed, her eyes never leaving her child, every step a careful negotiation with fear and trust. Evan followed last, ensuring that each step was secure, watching for any signs of instability. The log groaned under their combined weight, but it held, a fragile bridge over the chaos below. Once safely across, they paused for a moment to catch their breath. The floodwaters raged below, but for the first time since the storm began, they felt a glimmer of safety. Evan knelt beside the child, brushing wet hair from their face. "See? You can do this. You're doing great." Rex pressed against them both, warm, steady, and reassuring. In his amber eyes, there was no fear, only vigilance, loyalty, and an unspoken promise of protection. The child hugged him tightly, tears mixing with rain, but this time there was relief in the embrace, not terror. Evan glanced up at the forest canopy. The storm would not relent yet, but the immediate danger had been navigated. They had survived another treacherous section of the forest together, a team united by trust, courage, and the unyielding bond between human and dog. He knew that the journey was far from over. Higher ground awaited, as did new challenges, but for this moment, they had triumphed over fear, hesitation, and nature's raw power. And as they pressed on, the quiet understanding between them, child, mother, Evan, and Rex, was palpable. They were stronger together, capable of facing whatever came next. The forest seemed endless, yet Evan knew they had to push forward. Every step was a test of endurance, every breath heavy with the scent of wet earth and rain. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches violently, some snapping and falling with thunderous crashes. The sound of the floodwaters below grew louder, echoing through the ravines, reminding them that danger was never far behind. The child clutched Rex tightly, the dog remaining calm and vigilant, ears swiveling to catch every sound. Evan had learned to trust Rex's instincts completely. The German Shepherd was more than a guide, he was a protector, a guardian who understood the perils of the forest as well as Evan did. As they navigated a particularly steep section of the slope, a surge of water from the swollen creek suddenly breached its banks, sending a wave of muddy water cascading down toward them. Evan shouted, "Move! Now!" The mother instinctively grabbed the child and leaped, Evan right behind, while Rex lunged to intercept, barking and snapping at the edges of the surge. They stumbled onto a slightly higher ledge, mud sliding beneath their feet. The child clung to Rex, who planted his paws firmly, bracing against the shifting ground. Evan supported the mother, helping her regain balance. For a moment, the world seemed suspended, the rain, the rushing water, the storm's fury, all frozen in a chaotic ballet. Then movement caught Evan's eye. A fallen tree, partially submerged in the floodwater, was being carried downstream, a potential battering ram that could destroy anything in its path. His mind raced, calculating distance, timing, and trajectory. "Get back," he shouted, pushing the mother and child behind a sturdy pine. Rex growled low, body tense, muscles coiled, ready to react. The log slammed into the slope below with a deafening crash, sending mud and water spraying in every direction. Branches snapped, leaves rained down like needles, and the forest trembled under the impact. Evan pressed the child close to his chest, heart hammering, while the mother wrapped her arms around them both. Rex's ears were flat, eyes focused, tail low but rigid. Once the immediate threat passed, Evan exhaled slowly, scanning the surroundings. The storm showed no sign of letting up, yet the ledge provided a small window of safety. He knew they couldn't stay here for long, the floodwaters would continue to rise, and the forest would continue to shift. Every second counted. They moved again, step by careful step, ascending toward higher ground. The incline was steep, roots slick with rain, mud threatening to pull their boots from under them. The child stumbled once, then again, each time saved by Evan's steady hands or Rex's timely intervention. The bond between human and dog was palpable. Rex seemed to anticipate danger before it happened, positioning himself perfectly to shield the child, guiding them through the chaos. At one point, the mother gasped as a large branch cracked above their heads, threatening to fall. Evan grabbed it just in time, holding it back while the child slipped past, clinging to Rex. The storm was merciless, but their resolve was stronger. Fear was ever present, but trust, the trust between them, and the instinctual understanding between child and dog, kept them moving forward. Hours seemed to pass in this relentless environment. Each step was exhausting, each breath laborious, but progress was being made. Evan's mind was sharp, calculating the safest routes, while his body carried the weight of responsibility. The child's small hands occasionally reached for him, seeking reassurance, while the mother's protective gaze never wavered. Finally, they reached a small clearing, a rare patch of slightly higher ground. Muddy water lapped at its edges, but for the moment, it was stable. The child collapsed into Rex's side, exhausted, but safe. The mother sank beside them, hugging the child tightly, tears mixing with the rain. Evan stood over them, scanning the forest, heart pounding, sweat and rain streaming down his face. They were not out of danger, but this plateau offered a chance, a moment to rest, gather strength, and prepare for the final push to the safety beyond the forest. Rex remained alert, amber eyes scanning, ears twitching, ready to react instantly to any new threat. The child stroked Rex's fur, whispering words of gratitude, and for a fleeting moment, amidst the chaos, there was a calm born of trust, courage, and survival instinct. Evan knew that the storm and the flood were relentless, but together, with vigilance, courage, and the unwavering bond between human and dog, they could face whatever came next. And as the wind howled around them, he realized that survival was not just about reaching higher ground, it was about the unity and trust that carried them through the heart of the storm. The clearing offered little time to rest. The floodwaters were relentless, seeping closer with each passing minute, carrying broken branches, leaves, and debris like miniature ships of chaos. Evan's chest heaved from exhaustion, but he knew they had to move again. The forest was unforgiving, and the storm's fury would not wait. "Stay close," he whispered, gripping the child's small hand, while the mother's other hand held tight to their shoulders. Rex moved ahead, ears twitching, body low, muscles taut like coiled springs, scanning for any signs of danger. The child's eyes were wide, mirroring both fear and trust, following every movement of the dog as if Rex were the only steady presence in this maelstrom. A sudden crack echoed above. A massive pine, loosened by the saturated soil and violent wind, began to topple toward their path. Evan reacted instantly, pulling the child and mother aside, but the momentum was too great. The tree slammed down with a deafening crash, sending a wave of muddy water and debris surging toward them. Rex barked sharply, leaping in front of the child, his body acting as a living shield, muscles straining, eyes locked on the falling tree. The child screamed, pressed close to the dog, while Evan dove to stabilize the mother, keeping them from sliding into the water. Mud and splinters flew in every direction, rain mingling with sweat and tears. For a moment, it seemed the storm might claim them all. Then, as if sensing the moment's gravity, Rex acted with precision. He bolted forward, grabbing a dangling root of the falling tree with his jaws, anchoring it just enough to deflect some of its impact. The tree groaned, shifted, but did not crush them. Evan's heart raced. He had never seen a display of canine intelligence and courage like this. Every second mattered, and Rex's instincts kept them alive. Once the immediate danger passed, Evan quickly assessed their next move. The path ahead was a jagged incline, partially washed away by the flood. Each step could be fatal. He glanced at the mother and child. Fear had etched their faces, but determination, fueled by trust in him and Rex, was evident. "Hold on to Rex," Evan instructed. "Move slowly, carefully. I'll be right behind you." The child hesitated, then nodded, gripping the dog's fur like a lifeline. The mother followed, placing one cautious foot after another, eyes darting to each unstable section. The ascent was torturous. Water cascaded over rocks, creating mini waterfalls that threatened to sweep them off balance. Branches bent dangerously under wind, and the forest seemed to close in on them. Yet, the bond between human and dog was undeniable. Rex guided the child, adjusting speed to match small legs, positioning himself between them and every hazard. He barked at potential threats, nudged the child around slippery patches, and remained unflinching in his vigilance. At one point, a section of the slope gave way. Rocks tumbled, sending mud sliding toward the child. Rex reacted instantly, placing his paws firmly against the soil, bracing, and creating a buffer that allowed the child to regain footing. Evan and the mother followed, each movement deliberate, calculated, fueled by adrenaline and trust. Finally, they reached a small plateau, a temporary sanctuary amidst the chaos. Rain fell in sheets, visibility low, and the forest groaned under the storm's power, but for the first time in hours, there was a moment of relative stability. The child collapsed into Rex's side, trembling, but alive. The mother knelt beside them, clutching both tightly, whispering words of relief and gratitude. Evan exhaled, scanning the forest. They were not completely safe, but they had survived the worst of the storm's fury. The child stroked Rex's wet fur, whispering, thank you for keeping me safe." Rex leaned into the embrace, calm, steady, and proud. His amber eyes gleamed with intelligence and loyalty, the silent acknowledgement of a hero. Evan smiled faintly, exhaustion threatening to overtake him, but a profound sense of relief washed over him. The storm was not yet over, but they had overcome the forest's deadliest gauntlet. Every drop of rain, every gust of wind, every threat from nature had been met with courage, trust, and an unbreakable bond between human and dog. In the silence that followed the storm's immediate chaos, Evan realized that survival was more than reaching high ground. It was about unity, bravery, and the instinctual bond that had guided them through life-threatening peril. He glanced at the child and mother, then at Rex, understanding that this moment, this fleeting triumph, would be etched in all of their memories forever. The storm had begun to ease, though the forest was far from calm. Mudslides littered the path, branches and leaves strewn in chaotic patterns, and the distant roar of floodwaters echoed like a warning. Evan knew they couldn't linger here for long. The plateau was temporary, a brief respite before they had to navigate the remaining treacherous slope. The child leaned heavily against Rex, still trembling but alive, eyes wide with both fear and awe. I thought we were lost," the child whispered, voice barely audible over the residual rumble of water and wind. Rex pressed his head gently against the child's shoulder, offering comfort without words, a living embodiment of calm and protection. Evan glanced at the mother. Her face was streaked with rain and tears, exhaustion etched into every line, yet her grip on her child remained steadfast. "We're not lost," Evan said firmly, trying to instill confidence in both of them and himself. "We just have to keep moving, carefully." Almost there. They advanced slowly, each step measured, every footfall a gamble against mud, loose stones, and slick roots. Rex stayed ahead, constantly scanning, alert to every potential danger. His tail remained low but stiff, ears twitching to catch subtle shifts in the environment. He occasionally barked softly, guiding the child and mother along safer patches, nudging them away from unstable ground. As they rounded a bend, Evan froze. The floodwaters, though partially receded, had created a narrow natural bridge over a deep ravine. The planks and rocks forming it were slick with mud and rain, some precariously balanced. One wrong step could send them tumbling into the raging waters below. "Rex, stay with me," Evan whispered, steadying himself. The dog nodded, seemingly understanding the gravity of the situation. The child clung to Rex, hands gripping fur, legs trembling, while the mother's hands held both tightly. Evan tested the first step, shifting weight slowly, feeling the plank creak but hold. One by one, they crossed, each movement deliberate, heartbeats pounding in rhythm with the storm's residual chaos. The child's small foot slipped once, but Rex's body was there in an instant, bracing and guiding, his instincts flawless. When they reached the other side, Evan allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. The plateau beyond was larger, safer, a patch of high ground free from immediate flood danger. The child collapsed into Rex's side, burying their face in wet fur. The mother knelt beside them, hugging tightly, whispering words of reassurance and gratitude. Evan sank to his knees, hands resting on the ground, exhaustion overtaking adrenaline. For the first time in hours, they could observe their surroundings without immediate threat. The forest bore the scars of the storm, fallen branches, muddy trails, and displaced rocks, but they had survived. And it was clear that none of this would have been possible without Rex's unwavering guidance and protection. Evan watched the child pat Rex gently. "You kept me safe," the child murmured. Rex nuzzled the child, amber eyes reflecting intelligence and calm resolve. The mother's eyes glistened with tears, her gratitude unspoken but profound. She glanced at Evan, voice shaking. I don't know how to thank you." Evan simply nodded, too tired to speak, his eyes following Rex as the dog stood vigilant, scanning the forest for any lingering threats. Even as the rain lightened, the air remained thick with mist and tension. The forest was alive with distant water flows, and every movement reminded them of nature's unpredictability. Yet, amidst this chaos, there was a sense of peace, a momentary victory over a storm that had tested every fiber of their strength, courage, and trust. Hours passed, but they stayed on the plateau, gathering strength and composure. The child whispered stories to Rex, the mother laughed softly, trying to calm trembling hands, and Evan allowed himself to feel relief. The storm had taken much, but it hadn't claimed them. Survival, it seemed, was not just about escaping danger, it was about unity, instinct, and the bond that had guided them through the forest's wrath. As night began to fall, the forest took on a softer, eerie glow under the receding storm clouds. Light reflected off the wet leaves and mud, casting shadows that danced like memories of the chaos that had passed. The child dozed lightly against Rex, the mother leaning back against a tree, and Evan remained watchful, knowing that vigilance was still necessary, but grateful for this fleeting peace. In that quiet moment, the bond between human and dog, child and rescuer, was undeniable. Rex remained alert yet calm, the silent hero of a story written in rain, mud, and survival. And for the first time, they could almost believe that safety, true safety, was within reach. The forest had finally begun to breathe. The storm's fury had passed, leaving behind a landscape reshaped by rain and wind, puddles reflecting gray clouds, broken branches strewn across the muddy ground, and the occasional bird cautiously returning to the treetops. The clearing they had reached was higher ground, wide enough to provide a sense of safety, and the air smelled of wet earth and fresh pine. The child, exhausted yet relieved, remained nestled against Rex's side. The dog's steady breathing was almost hypnotic, a reassuring rhythm that seemed to whisper, "You're safe now." Evan knelt nearby, scanning the surroundings one last time. The storm had tested their endurance, their courage, and their trust, but it had also revealed the strength of their bond, not just between human and dog, but among all three of them. "Rex, you were amazing," Evan murmured, running a hand along the dog's damp, fur-covered back. The German shepherd looked up at him, amber eyes glinting with quiet intelligence, as if acknowledging the compliment but silently insisting, "It's not over until everyone is safe." The mother knelt beside her child, brushing wet hair from their face. "I don't think I'll ever forget what just happened," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You kept us alive, all of us. Thank you." She glanced at Rex, whose chest rose and fell steadily as he settled into a protective position around the child. It was clear she understood, without words, that this dog was far more than a pet. He was a guardian, a hero, a companion whose courage had outshone the storm itself. Evan guided them further into the clearing, seeking the safest patch of dry land. Small pools reflected the dim light, and mud clung to shoes, clothes, and fur alike, but none of that mattered anymore. Their survival was proof that instinct, training, and trust could overcome even nature's most ruthless challenges. The child finally lifted their head from Rex's side, eyes bright despite the exhaustion. I'm not scared anymore," they said softly, brushing mud from their knees. "Not with Rex here." The dog nudged them gently with his nose, tail wagging faintly in approval. Evan allowed himself a faint smile. Moments like this made every danger, every struggle, worthwhile. As evening approached, the forest glimmered under the soft, golden light of a setting sun breaking through lingering clouds. Birds sang cautiously, insects began their evening chorus, and the gentle rustling of leaves suggested that life was returning to the battered landscape. The storm's destruction was evident, but the forest, like them, had endured. Evan finally let himself sit, leaning against a large pine with the mother and child close. The child continued to stroke Rex's fur, whispering little stories and secrets as if the dog were the keeper of all their fears and hopes. Rex remained calm, a sentinel whose presence radiated reassurance and strength. "I don't think I've ever seen courage like this," the mother said quietly, her gaze shifting from the child to Evan and then to Rex. "Not just yours, Evan, but Rex's. He saved our lives." Evan shook his head, still catching his breath. "We saved each other," he said simply. "We trusted him, and he trusted us. That's what kept us alive." Rex let out a soft, almost contented sigh, as if confirming Evan's words. Night began to fall, and the clearing was bathed in a gentle, silvery light from the rising moon. The storm was gone, but its memory lingered, etched into mud, broken branches, and the hearts of those who had endured it. Yet amidst that memory was a profound sense of gratitude, unity, and an unspoken promise: no matter the challenge, no matter the danger, together they could face anything. Evan watched the child and mother settle near Rex, their trust and bond evident in every gesture. He realized that survival was not simply about reaching safety, it was about connection, courage, and the silent, unwavering loyalty of a guardian willing to face the storm head-on. In that quiet night, the forest finally exhaled. The floodwaters receded, the wind softened, and in the stillness, the three of them, human and dog alike, found not only safety but a renewed sense of hope. And Rex, steadfast and proud, remained their protector, their hero, and their silent reminder that bravery and love often speak louder than words. For the child, the mother, and Evan, the memory of the storm would last a lifetime, but so too would the memory of a German shepherd who refused to leave their side, who defied nature's fury, and who proved that true courage is measured not in the absence of fear, but in the unwavering resolve to protect those you love.